I also want to acknowledge our guests who are joining us virtually from territories across Ontario, and to anyone who is watching on the live stream. Welcome. I am Shirlene Bomberry. I am a member of the Survivor Secretariat's Board of Directors and a survivor of the Mohawk Institute. I was in a residential school from September 1966 to June 1970 when it closed. And I was one of 4 children that were taken from my mom. I was in my 11th year. I had a brother 9, I had a brother 7, and I had a sister who was 4 years old. And we were taken from my mother by the Children's Aid and put into the Mohawk Institute in Brantford. So the reason why I wanted to come on this board, be a board member, was because I myself never spoke about the residential school. I never spoke about it at all. I carried a code of shame and guilt that I was in there. So I never ever spoke about it. And so after 24 years, I finally said to my kids that they were, well, when I got safe talk around other survivors, that I finally said that I was in that residential school up there, because I never shared it all. I never shared in my marriage. I never shared to my children. It just wasn't talked about. It's a secret that I had kept. But secrets cost, so I just had to come out with it and share that I was in there and start doing my work on myself, on my journey to healing, which will be, never ending. So yeah, then that's the reason why I joined the Survivors Secretariat Board. I wanted our voices to be heard. I wanted our truth to come out. I wanted the people to hear the truth. That's our truth. That's our lived experiences. And that's what, maybe 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, who's gonna be here to tell, We need to do it now. And that's why, getting on that Survivor Secretariat, and I've had so much support for that. But anyway, I'm glad to be on there, on the board, and also on the board of Mohawk Village Memorial Park. That's a good thing too. That's a really good program or event that we have trying to continue. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge Joe Martin for reciting the Thanksgiving address in the Mohawk language prior to us launching the live stream. Yahweh Joe. I've heard Joe a lot, and I'm so proud of him because of his youth and the age and everything, in reviving our languages again, So like I could say my name, like it's mine is Scanas Hoguego, Ewehehawe Nigaso, Otayoni, Nevagashauta, Kayakoto Neoquensuta. So what I started learning in the Cayuga language. I've done Mohawk language and Ojibwe language too, but I was the ECE teacher before. So in order to converse with the children, the little children in the preschool, I started to learn the basic languages, basic commands and things like that, so that I could converse with them while they were being taught by a language teacher in our classrooms. So I'm so glad, I did that, but it does start with the parents at home and everything. And I'm very proud of the ones who are survivors, who's taken the initiative to go relearn and then teach our languages in whatever, It's awesome. It sounds so beautiful, especially when it's explained and everything like that. I have a little 5-year-old that's goes to Isle Thomas and does the Ganohanyo in the language and actions. So I'm just so proud of him. And then I didn't know about the horse because I had taken a language before. I didn't know about the horse, how to say it. And he says to me, "Oh, Grandma, I forgot." He says, "But if you need to know, you just go on a Gayakono app." He said, "They got it on there." So he's learning, because he said in 25 years, he said he's going to be the Gayakono teacher. And I believe him. Yeah, he's a teacher right now. So that's why it is. It's very important to open up our whatever we have happening in the language, because it's so beautiful and it talks about everything universal. So I really appreciate everybody that's going forward with the languages. I know my Cree friends still talk Cree. My Ojibwe friends still do the Ojibwe too. So, we can do ours too, and we are. So now for that. Each of you should have received an annual report. Upon your arrival, inside this report, you will find a copy of the 2023 audited financial statements in this one here. So it should be inside your report, sir. Then when you came here. These statements and reports are also available on our website for those joining online. And I believe there is also a link on the social media posts directing you to where you can find them. If you do not have a copy, please raise your hand and someone will come around and provide you with one. So raise your hand if you don't have a copy, if you didn't get one. I would like to welcome Whitney Dean from Millard's Chartered Professional Accountants up to provide her professional opinion on our 2023-2024 audited financial statements. Welcome, Whitney.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I'm going to go over the audit of the Survivor Secretariat for 2024 and briefly touch on the financial statements and the auditor's report therein. The complete financial statements, as mentioned, are in your financial packages, and I encourage you to read through them. So to paraphrase the report, we've audited the complete financial statements, which comprise the statement of financial position, the statement of operations, and changes in net financial assets, and cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with accounting standards for not-for-profit organizations. We've issued a qualified opinion on the auditor's report. The qualification is specific to donations received, and that's a very common qualification in not-for-profits, just that the audit is not, or the donations aren't subject to completeness, just because we're unable to test that, but it's very common within the industry. In addition, the auditor's report goes on to outline the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. Those include the preparation of the financial statements in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for not-for-profit organizations, and for overseeing the financial reporting process and for the internal controls as management determines is necessary to enable the preparation of the financial statements. It also goes on to outline our responsibilities as auditors. Those would include identifying and assessing the risks of material misstatement and designing and performing audit procedures to address those risks. We also obtain an understanding of the internal controls relevant in the audit and design tests to evaluate those controls. We also evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies used and the reasonableness of estimates within the financial statements. We conclude on the appropriateness of management's use of the going concern basis of accounting, and we evaluate the overall presentation and structure and content of the financial statements, and this includes the disclosures within the statements. So based on our work, it is our opinion that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of the company and its performance for the year in accordance with accounting standards for not-for-profit entities. We would like to inform you that in conducting our audit, we provided an audit plan at the start of the audit and communicated to board members during the audit. If you flip to the statement of financial position, I'll just highlight total assets for the year ended March 31st, 2024 were $6,189,632. During the year, the organization saw a decrease in cash related, which can be largely linked to the increase in the grant receivable at year end, as well as spending on intangible assets throughout the year. This is further broken down in the statement of cash flows a few pages further into the statements. Another item I'll highlight is prepaid expenditures. Those are further broken down in note 4 to give you further details on what's involved in that balance. So total liabilities at March 31st, 2024 ended at $6,078,590. Note 7 further outlines the fluctuations within these accounts balances, and the organization saw an increase in deferred capital contributions. So what those are funding that's been used to purchase assets, and they get brought into the income statement as we depreciate the asset. So total revenue for the year totaled $4,468,262. The increase over the prior year is largely a result of increased federal funding recognized. Total expenditures for the year totaled $4,392,652. The organization saw an increase in things like administration and staffing, as well as meeting costs throughout the year. I won't go through all the notes, but I will be around if you have any questions or would like to ask them now, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. But on behalf of Millard's, I would just like to thank Laura and the rest of the staff for their help during the audit, and I'd like to thank the board members for having us to work with you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, up for the update. Is there any questions? Please raise your hands if you have any questions. None? Okay. Well, if you think of any, you're sitting in there processing, just let us know. Thank you, Whitney, and a special thank you goes out to the Albert group here on Six Nations, who does our accounting for keeping our finances, finances organized. I now want to introduce our Secretariat Lead, Laura Arndt, to speak to our strategic highlights for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Laura?
I'm good to have your glasses to share it.
Yeah, I have my glasses this year. Last year I never had any.
Last year was the year of an audit where everyone forgot glasses. We had COVID as a reality for our our AGM, and so it made for a very interesting time frame. And I think Charlene did the same part of the program for us last year. But I just really quickly want to say to Whitney, to Keaton, to Jesse, and to Gaetan, and especially to Diane. I've had Diane, who sits with finance for the board. Diane, can you go take a look at this? Diane, can you be ready for an interview? Diane, can you sign a final statement? And every time I have the last minutes. Diane's always there, always on the documents, and always available. But these 5 people have been absolutely critical to the organization keeping its finances in a very good shape. So I want to thank you all for all that you do for the Secretariat and for the board. So I also want to say thank you to the board, staff, and partners. And you'll find a list of all of the people who've helped us over the last year on page 11 of the AGM. I want to start, like Roberta did, by offering some words around the impact of the passing of former senator, former judge, former commissioner, former law student, Mr. Murray Sinclair. While, like the survivors, I'd had the opportunity to meet him during all of the gatherings and in some private sessions. I also had the honor of hosting the Ontario Education event with his support and the support of the ED of the TRC. And for me, what many people don't talk about is the importance of the work of the TRC and the Commission was the fact that families for the first time started talking about the experiences parents, aunts, and uncles had experienced as a result of being in an Indian residential school across this country. While the scope of the TRC's mandate didn't include every person, specifically Métis and Inuit people, the fact is they started a conversation that continues to this day, and it's because of that conversation this Secretariat exists. But when I think of Murray St. Clair, I think of his words about reconciliation. And his words about reconciliation is we have to think of it like a mountain. That as we climb it to try and get to its peak, we're going to face storms and obstacles. It's going to challenge us to our core. But at the end, it's a just thing that we're doing in seeking reconciliation. And I think these days, as organizations across the country struggle, I default to his words, because as we grapple with funding cuts, as we grapple with changes in the way Canada is approaching the voice of survivors in truth-telling, I have to look at it as part of the mountain climb. And so I want to share, he continues to be in my thoughts each day, but I think he's in the thoughts of almost every Indigenous family in this country as the community and the nation gets ready to mourn his loss. And I think we're stunned still that the mourning has not yet begun. So I just wanted to start there. But I want to also share kind words, as Tabitha kindly, gently reminds me always. We work from a place of kindness because we work from a place of good medicine. And so as I talk about both our successes and the barriers we've faced over the last 3 years, I like to believe that we have been able to do what we've been able to do because of the kindness of partners in the communities, funders, and in-kind contributions we've received from municipalities and organizations across the country. So if we can talk a little bit about the money. Over the last 3 years, we received just under $10.3 million in contributions from the Indian Residential School Community Support Fund. We were able to secure just over $3.8 million from the province of Ontario through the Ministry of Indigenous Relations. I want to tell you, we started with Ontario with a contribution of $400,000. That was the initial offer. By the end of 3 years, $3.8 million is how much Ontario was able to contribute to the $10.2 million or $10.3 million Canada contributed. We also, let me turn my page here. I'm trying to stay on track because I tend to ramble. We were also able to receive about just over $100,000 in funding from the Law Foundation Ontario, and $200,000 from what is now, what was then the National Indian Brotherhood and is now Future Generations Fund. The funding we received helped us to further our mission in 4 primary areas. These are the areas we call our pillars. They include research and document collection, ground search, advocacy, and commemoration. And the chart on the screen will give you a little bit of an overview of the funding in each of these areas over the last 3 years. We did very well with what we were provided in the first 3 years. We measured our work, we planned for it, and we planned within the framework of the funding that we had. We pushed when we needed more. But this year in July, we were informed about funding cuts. And if we can move to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened in early 2024. The Secretariat began to become increasingly concerned about the security of our funding as we were informed in February of 2024 that there would be a $3 million a year funding cap on all organizations seeking federal funding. We were also informed that funding for the 2024-2025 year would not flow until after the release of the federal budget, and most likely early June or July, the funding would then come down. In July of 2024, we were informed that Canada was not only reducing funding, they were significantly reducing it with a funding cap of $500,000 per year, $2.5 million less than they had initially committed to in the earlier announcements. This announcement was shared in a 30-minute teleconference, and I have to tell you, it was less than conversational. We entered a teleconference, our mics were turned off. We had 30 minutes of speaking, a few questions were answered, they ended the question. No protocols, no guidelines, nobody was consulted about the funding cuts that were coming down from Canada. We actively opposed the funding cap, so quickly so that we were at a gathering when the announcement came down that night, thanks to the work of CBC and I say the due diligence of Fluid Communications being on top of CBC, we were able to get the news out about the funding cuts. 4 days later, we were in Ottawa. We were hosting a rally with survivors and organizations to try and bring attention to the announcement that it made, and we met with the Assistant Deputy Minister for Cernak. Within another week or two, we had a meeting with the Minister of Cernak, who came to Six Nations and promised us that the first week of September we would hear more about the funding and hopefully an increase in funding. The announcement we received a few weeks later was that yes, Canada was increasing the funding ceiling to $3 million, but they were not increasing the base funding. So the base funding was going to stay at $92 million over 2 years, and that meant $45.5 million, $45.5 million this year, $45.5 million next year. The problem is, if we were to get our $3 million funding, it would be on the back of communities who would get less and less funding. The initial $216 million in funding that was provided to organizations in 2021 went to 142 to 145 communities. The proposed funding for the next 2 years was not just going to 145. We understood there to be another 70-plus communities seeking funding. So $45.5 million was actually going to end up with 220 communities, which isn't far off from about $100,000 a year per community if you really looked at the honest numbers. But Canada had said to us, good luck, you've got your $3 million, and we couldn't accept the funding because we couldn't do it on the back of other survivor organizations across the country. So we made the difficult decision to stand on principle, and the decision to stand on principle was that we would stand with every community across the country seeking funding and press Canada to restore full funding. An outcome of this decision was we have no funding. As of March 31st, there is not one community in this country that has received any funding from Canada. All applications for new funding for the current year, even if we had accepted the money that Canada was offering, we wouldn't receive it until after the funding application window closes, which is in about a week's time. and the new funding probably wouldn't flow until January of 2025. So as a result, we sit in an environment where Canada won't commit to funding, won't sign off in agreements, and we're not alone. 147 communities who did have funding arrangements, and some of the ones that were just applying for funding, all had to reconfigure what they were doing and if it was possible to move forward. For the Secretariat, the lack of funding since April 1st has meant we had to put the brakes on two major agreements that we were pursuing. One was the completion of the Mohawk Village Memorial Park as part of our commemoration work, and the second was a major project involving Indigenous data sovereignty and data governance associated with all the historical archival information work that we've been doing. It's been more than 7 months. We met with Canada last week. They still have no answers for us. We got emails basically saying we have outstanding reports. We've submitted all of our reports. We've submitted all of our audits. We've submitted everything we've been asked. This morning I met with the organizations across Ontario. Ashley and I sat in that meeting where they were saying they were being told the exact same thing when Canada was contacting them. So it's the exact same place we were in 2021 when the first agreement processes went through. But with that said, let's talk a little bit about the future. Despite the funding challenges, the Survivor Secretariat continues to remain steadfast on our mission to bring the children home. We're trying to wrap up as many of the projects we've been working on as possible as we seek funding from alternative sources, including launching new fundraising activities. The proposals we're trying to finish up include phase 1 of our database development with Anna Mickey. We're also trying to complete, at this point, the work we're doing with No History by narrowing our scope to focus on trying to find the names of the children as a #1 priority. We've also been trying to conclude and wrap up some of the work we've been doing about outreach. We have to slow that work down because we simply do not have the resources at this time to proceed. When I take a look at the year in review, when we started all this work, there was no manual on how to conduct this sort of investigation. As many of you know, Kim Murray was the Secretariat in its early days and set the foundation around how we wanted to work. But much of the work we've been doing over the last 2.5 years is, okay, so who's doing what? And if there isn't somebody doing it, we pull in the experts and we ask them to help us figure it out as we go. As recently as this morning, Roberta comes in with 2 jump drives. One jump drive is from one person, and the other jump drive is from an organization. I don't know what to do with it, but there's a lot of pictures on it. They're really cool. And we're constantly trying to figure out what do we do when we continue to get records and documents and archival information, and we don't have the resources. These are going to be the barriers we're going to be facing as we move forward. So as we do our work and as we struggle without a manual, we're extremely thankful to all the individuals and organizations that have come together to share what we have learned with one another. Although developing a process to conduct these investigations is very much tailored to each school, it's been through collaboration with national experts and other survivor organizations that we've been able to develop such a robust process on how to research and document collections and conduct ground search in our own region in our own way. We continue to partner with organizations like Anishinaabe Nation and Anishinaabe Nation. Even at the OSI gathering, the video we funded as part of the work we did around the funding cuts was shown at the OSI gathering by Anishinaabe Nation. Our partnerships and collaboration are not about funding. It's about how we work for survivors together. And as the video was shown, for those of our people who were in the room, it is because of your commitment and dedication that we were able to be part of creating a video, a report, and a process that became a national point of reflection at the final gathering of the Office of the Special Interlocutor. So as we talk about our key work, I can't stop by giving you an overview. I have to talk a little bit about the research and document collection work we've been doing. As of March 31st, 2024, we were able to identify 4,950 known students who attended the Mohawk Institute Indian Residential Schools and confirm 100 child deaths who had died, of children who had died while their lives were associated with the Mohawk Institute. Through our research activities, we've obtained 29,000 relevant documents and have reviewed and tagged more than 20,000 of these documents. We're in the process of compiling the documents with the intent of transferring them, which, if we're in the current year, has begun to happen. But we're creating a database, and that's where all the records and documents we have collected are going to go. It's going to be a searchable database that communities can use and families can use. We don't create for the Six Nations community, we create for the 60 communities in the 2 geographic regions who had their children taken. And so we want to ensure that it honors and reflects a survivor nation that is comprised of not just children of Six Nations, but the children of 60 communities. Like, when you think about it, 60 communities across this country, the James Bay and Hudson's Bay region. On top of that, it's in a massive amount of information that we work to try and figure out how we can transfer, hold, protect, and share with the families because they need to bring their children home. I want to talk to you a little bit about our ground search work. Over the last 3 years, we've mirrored some of the work that was done by the Mohawk mothers, and we've comprised our own archaeological panel with Dr. Scott Hamilton, with Tanya Hill-Montour, and with Ed Asta, helping us and guiding us in the way that we do our work. We have what I like to believe the most innovative ground search team and approach to ground search that was funded by the National Indian Brotherhood, which is the Youth Supporting Survivors Summer Program and Ground Search Team. It is people, and young people specifically, of our community who need to be leading this work because these become their lived experiences and their stories that are shared in the community. So for 3 summers, we've had Indigenous young people from 6 nations on the ground search. The thing that I'm really liking about it is somehow, some way, 1 or 2 of them always stays over and ends up becoming a part of our permanent team. I think it's a powerful way to ensure that young people know they don't have to wait for their time to be part of the conversation. They're part of the conversation from the get-go, and they've been that with survivors since day 1. Last year, our primary focus was to complete the first stage of data collection on the grounds of His Majesty's Royal Chapel of the Mohawks. Our search work allowed us to collect GPR data on known and unmarked graveyards with similar soil compositions to the grounds on the Mohawk Institute. This will provide us with what we call comparative data. The thing that people want to know is, how come it takes so long? It's because we're not using just one technology. We use multiple technologies, so every acreage that we cover with one technology, we then cover with a second technology, and then we cover with a third technology. All of those technologies are used, operated, and part of our ground search efforts, but they're being used by the young people. So we train young people due to the kindness of our partners, and they operate the technologies and the drone work. In 2023, the Secretariat scanned 66 grids, or 1.6 acres, using ground-penetrating radar equipment, and have enhanced our general search with efforts by employing geographic information systems, LiDAR, and drone imaging, and total station technologies. All that to say, we have really cool tools that allow us to get unique insights into the ground. Some of them, like drones from the air, some around surveying the ground so we can make sure we have a better lock on exactly what we're looking at and we're scanning, and others give us just a different kind of insight onto the ground using a new technology. The reason we do this is so that we can filter out the background noise and get a better image of what it is we're really looking at. As we move on, we continue to focus on quality of our work. While the technology may take a long time to catch up so we can do our analysis, we need to make sure the data we collect is of the highest quality, so when the technology catches up, our images are the best quality needed to give us the information we're looking for. Part of the things I want to talk to you just a little bit about in the ground search work, and this is where the relationship with Brantford has been so important to us. It's been because of our relationship with Brantford, we've been able to access municipal maps, drawings, images, aerial photos, historic reference points, so that we can add to the information we have. We've also been able to work with the City of Brantford because 607 acres that we're interested in go far beyond the marked lands that we're working on right now at the Mohawk Institute. There are days, I have to tell Mayor Davis, I have to have 5-6 cup of teas while I sit through some of the meetings with Jocelyn where we talk through zoning plans, repair work that needs to be done, proposed activities. But the City of Brantford invites us to every single meeting. They've invited us to their town halls. They've provided a space for us to come raise questions, raise concerns, and it's been a very valuable part of our work. And in our first year, it was through the City of Brantford that there was a order of council that was made around the release of the records and documents, and that order has now been expanded to 9 municipalities across the province where they make a commitment to share their information with communities across the country. So I want to thank Brantford for taking the lead on that work. When it comes to commemoration, the board and staff participated in local and national knowledge-sharing events, including traveling to Edmonton to learn about burial protection laws, to Iqaluit to learn about the realities faced by Inuit residential school survivors, and to Thunder Bay for GIS training. The Outreach and Engagement Team, Board of Directors, and Wellness Team have hosted fireside chats in 6 nations, Walpole Island, Munsee, and Oneida. Our dedicated staff have worked hard to build connections and to create brave spaces for dialogue and healing. When it comes to advocacy, we've also launched our first ever Orange Shirt fundraiser. With the contributions from this event, we were able to travel to England to access records and documents at the Palace Archives in Lambeth. In addition to the baseball fundraiser that we did around the t-shirt sales, when the Toronto Blue Jays, Jays Care Foundation, found out that we were trying to raise funds to go to England, they made an additional contribution of $17,000 to the Secretariat to offset all costs so that the team of 5 who went had their airfare, accommodations, meals, everything covered so that we could do the trip in England without trying to figure out how we were going to pay for it. We were also able to meet, and Roberta was a little less enthused about this part, but we did meet with Reverend Paul Wright, King Charles' personal chaplain. He brought out their side of the covenant chain. We talked a little bit about the work that we're doing. We met in King Charles' personal chapel. And it was informal, it was friendly, but it was in large part because of his visit here to 6 Nations the previous year that we were invited to come, and they made the full library archives accessible to us. So Roberta, Mark Pritchard, who is in the room with us today, and myself with 2 people from No History did the trip. And it was my first trip to England. I think Roberta's as well. The only thing we saw were library archives. Most of our ability to see a little bit here and there was late at night after everything was closed and the archives had closed. But more importantly, we accessed documents that predate Canada. They go back to the first contact. It was powerful, it was emotional, and it's a critical part of the work we're doing because we talk about the church's roles in the operations of the school, but what we don't often talk about is the impact of companies like the New England Company, who were critical in bringing together the role of the church, trade, and the colonial frame in what became the foundation for building Canada. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done over the last 3 years. My hope is we're going to put enough pressure on Canada to get the funding we need to continue into the next 3 years. It is getting realistically difficult as the resources diminish. We will continue to keep you updated, and the best way for you to know what we're up to is to please contact our website. Please stay in touch and read our blogs and our information. And for those of you in the room today who have been generous of your time and your financial support, I can't thank you enough. Every time I walk into Cobb's, and I'm looking at Mark right now, I walk in and it's like, oh, we're doing this. And Mayor Davis, I would tell you, he is the embodiment of what I would call a good citizen. And I think he thinks of his business, he thinks of the community he serves, and he realizes his business thrives because of the community and does what he can to give back. I think of the Law Foundation, and as we've been talking realistically about our funding and the resources we have, you have said, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Because you keep coming back and saying you want to be part of this work because it matters. I think of Jay's Care. They've been with us, and we continue to work with them. I think of student groups at the university level. The power of campus politicking and voice can never be underestimated. And getting students engaged early. When they're children and in the classroom, I cannot think of a better way to say these things matter, because you never know who the student in your classroom is and whether they're a child with a history that's linked to the schools. And when they see you taking these issues on, they begin to feel like it's their classroom, their community. And as far as it comes to chief and council, I don't even know where to begin. I can't remember somebody who had said, hey, you need $1 million? Okay, we'll give you $1 million to get off the ground. And then they say, oh, you spent $1.3 million, no worry. And they stood with us and they've supported us. And every month or so we get a phone call getting asked, how's it going? Is there anything you need us to do? You've been a tremendous support, Six Nations Council, as we've been pressing Canada for funding. As things get tough, we're going to come back to you, unfortunately, probably again, to have deeper conversations. And most importantly, to the staff team. There would be no secretariat if not for all the staff in this room. And while Micah is not named in this report, it's because she joined us in April. She's our archivist and our data librarian. But as a board, who sit at the back of the room, and as their secretariat lead, I'm very proud of what you've all accomplished over the last 3 years, and I hope we continue to do so as we move into the next 3 years. So thank you for joining us at our AGM. It has been a work of love, so it's easier to talk about it. I want to give everybody just a couple of minutes to grab some snacks, and then we're going to wind it up with some closing remarks. But I think most people had sweets, but just refresh yourselves. And I think what I might do is just step into the closing remarks. I'm working very hard to stay on time, and I'm very proud that I only went 2 minutes over. So overall, in addition to the thanks that I've already offered you all, I want to thank you for coming today. I have a thing about breaking bread. I break bread with people who I am in relationship with, because food is a relationship of care, a relationship of love, and often a relationship of our interconnectedness. And so as we share food today, I think it speaks to the fact that the people who are in the room are the people whose relationships we value and who've been critical to our survival as an organization. As we move into the next week or two, there's a reason everything's dressed in red. And I want to thank Misty for her creative spirit, as always, as we move to National Indigenous Veterans Day and then Remembrance Day. I really do ask people to think about all of the sacrifices that have been made by people in this country to create this country. When survivors are fighting for the truth to be told, they're not fighting to say they don't love the country they live in. They're not fighting to say there's nothing good in the country they live in. What they're saying is the country they live in has truth-telling to do. And if they genuinely want to be the country they purport themselves to be, they need to do the work. And survivors have been doing the work of truth-telling for 70 years, many of them in this room. And so when we talk about Remembrance Day and those who gave their lives fighting wars, many of those who were Indigenous soldiers were often soldiers who were groomed at residential schools to be part of cadets, to join the military, and gave their lives fighting for this country. And they made the sacrifice of their lives as they made the sacrifices of their childrenhood to a country that needs to remember that sacrifice comes with truth-telling. So as we move to Remembrance Day and National Veterans Day, I do ask everyone to take a moment, pause, reflect, and remember that the importance of everything we do in this country has to be that we work in a place of truth-telling. And we tell the truth, whether it's about wars or whether it's about history. And we do that by ensuring that those who lived it get to speak to it. So as I say thank you, I'd like everyone to give just a little round of applause to the board members of the Survivor Secretariat for all they do. And with that said, is there anybody from the board who would like to make any final remarks to the group before we close off today? Are you all still tired out from Ottawa last week? So with that said, I want to thank you all for joining us today and wish you safe travels as you head back to work, to home, or wherever you go from here. Thank you all for being here.